Hi, Intersection Church. I'm back for this Get Out series where we're talking about how to get out into our world, how to interact with our world in a way that we have the opportunity to transform our world with the power of the gospel. We're directly in the teaching of Jesus where he was teaching his disciples how to be the influencer that he was. So this is week number 2. And in week 2, we're only in Luke chapter 10, the first couple of verses. I want to read 4 verses with you today, and we're going to explore these next powerful concepts that he has for us in learning how to become an influencer for our world. Read with me from Luke chapter 10, verse 1. It says, "The Lord now chose 72 other disciples and sent them ahead in pairs to all the towns and places he planned to visit. These were his instructions to them. The harvest is great, but the workers are few. So pray to the Lord who's in charge of the harvest and ask him to send more workers into his fields. Now go, and remember that I'm sending you out as lambs among wolves. Don't take any money with you or a traveler's bag or an extra pair of sandals. And don't stop to greet anyone on the road." I find these concepts so mysterious until you spend a little time with Jesus on them. They blow my mind. You're probably ahead of me in how you see them, but for me, they're mind-blowing concepts, every single one of them. Last week, we talked about how he called us to go out in pairs, and to see the harvest is great because you can't operate in greatness until you see abundance, and how the workers are few. Today, I want you to notice that the next thing he says is, so pray to the Lord of the harvest. Now, prayer is the missing ingredient. It's not, he's saying, we need to learn how to articulate what it is that we need to do the work he's called us to do. Prayer is making petitions to God and then listening to his responses. It is the interaction with him. And I always hear young Christians say, I don't know how to pray. Listen, prayer is as simple as ordering pizza. It's you talking to the source what it is about what it is that you want. And in James' writing in the book of James, he says, did you know that a lot of us don't have because we don't ask? You know how you get to where you get in a relationship? I've prayed with people at the altar from time to time, married couples who are struggling, and she says, it ticks me off that after all these years together, he still doesn't know what I want. And I say to her, you know, God doesn't operate that way. He says, if you want something, take responsibility to ask. So pray to the Lord of the harvest. Begin to articulate what you want. Put it in actual words. Commit yourself. I think that's why we're called to pray where 2 or 3 agree as touching anything. That prayer of faith transforms things. It means that where you've involved somebody else, you commit yourself to something. You have committed to what you want. You've committed to what will make you happy. You've committed to what will be a healthy and a good future for you. Pray. Pray to the Lord of the harvest. Articulate in words what your issue is and commit yourself to what will make you happy to ask God for that. Then he says, pray to the Lord who's in charge of the harvest. And I believe he's saying here, you know, our tendency is to pray to everybody else. Our tendency is to talk to everybody else about what is wrong instead of talking to God. You know, I love this story. Years ago, I was struggling with a leadership issue, and I called my big brother. He'd been a mentor to me. He'd been a pastor. He was somebody I could turn to in time of need, and I poured out my heart to him, and I was talking, I was going on, and finally I noticed he was saying nothing back on the telephone, and I stopped, and I said, why aren't you talking to me? He said, well, because God isn't talking to me. And he said, that's interesting. Why do you think God isn't talking to me? And I said, I don't know. He always talks to you, doesn't he? My brother said, He said, let me ask you a question. Did you pray about this before you called me? I said, no, I figured I'd call you and get the wisdom of God. This is where I usually go. And all of a sudden, my brother's screaming at me. I'm holding the phone like way out here. He's saying, don't you ever do that to me again. I make a lousy God. I'm not your God. Go to him with your stuff, not to me. And all of a sudden it dawned on me that I talk to everybody else first. I tend to ask for advice from elders, counselors, peers, my wife, other people. I am putting them in the place of God. And then we have this uncomfortable thing where I finally get around to praying and he tells me what to do and it disagrees with all of them and I can't make anybody happy. I need to go to God first. Then I need to go to other people for wisdom and counsel. It is right that we talk to other people. Some of us don't have the multitude of counselors. The wisest man ever, Jesus said Solomon was the wisest man ever. And he said in the multitude of counselors there is safety. A lot of us live in this crazy, unsafe world because we don't get counsel. But even before we get counsel, pray to the Lord who's in charge of the harvest. Do you know he wants the harvest more than you do? He wants your life to be successful and powerful and rich and vibrant and successful in every way that you count success, more than you do. So when you talk to him, you're saying, God, I believe you want the good things in life for me more than I want them. And I want to talk to you about this first. Then I'll ask anybody else who's available or who you send my way, and I'll ask them for advice. Pray the Lord who's in charge of the harvest. And pray a specific thing. You know, I have prayer requests. I think it's important to articulate, as I taught you last week, to ask, to know what to ask, to articulate and take responsibility for what it is that you want out of life. That's part of this. Pray. But he also has a prayer request. Can you imagine a service where we're all sharing our prayer requests and somebody says, pray for Aunt Susie. She found out she has cancer. And somebody else says, pray for my job. I need better employment. And somebody else says, pray that I get a relationship. And then in the back of the room, you see Jesus put his hand up. And you say, Jesus, what is it that you want? He says, I got a prayer request too. My prayer is that God would send more workers into the harvest field. Wow, Jesus has a prayer request? He's saying, I work through people. If you're praying for God to do things in the world, you're praying for people to do things in the world because God put people in charge of his planet. And so parents, this is to arm parents with those. I often pray with parents who say, I don't know how to pray for my child. My child will not. I just talked to a mom a couple of nights ago who said, my child will not talk to me. I can't get a return phone call. They won't come to my house. They won't let me come to their house. Some things occurred years ago. We have no communication. How do I mother, she said, my child? I said, in Luke 10 it says, Jesus said, pray that the Lord would send forth workers. In other words, your prayer request is, God, would you send somebody to my son? Because I can't talk to him. I don't know why. Something happened, and my son doesn't talk to me anymore. My boss won't listen to me. My family isn't open to me. I feel out of control. Here's your prayer request. He's saying, pray that God would send the right worker who can talk to them. You know, I love this story. My pastor got saved because of something that happened in a bar. He was out. This is my mentor and the man who was so influential in my life. He tells the story about how he was trying to run away from God. He was far from God. One night he was at a bar and he was getting himself sloshed, he said. He wanted to get a good drunk going before he had to go back to work. This was on a Sunday afternoon or evening before he had to go to work the next day. And he said as he sat down and started drinking, a guy sat down next to him. And the more that guy drank, the more he would talk about Jesus. And he said to the guy, shut up. I'm out here in a bar trying to get away from that crazy religious crap. Don't you talk to me about Jesus. But the more that guy drank, the more he talked about Jesus, until finally the man who would one day become my pastor left the bar and started driving around in frustration trying to get away from people who talked about Jesus. And finally the thought occurred to him, the drunk guy doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't know Jesus. He doesn't know even what he says he knows about Jesus. He doesn't know. I might as well go to church. At least there they know what they're talking about. Went to a church that was having a revival service where a group of people were standing praying for him. And these people were saying, Omar Byler won't listen to us. So God, would you send somebody? Well, God sent a drunk guy in a bar to reach him. And my pastor got saved over that. The Bible has an example of God sending a donkey or handwriting on a wall. In other words, when you're asking God to send forth workers into his harvest field, you're saying, God, would you reach people I can't reach? Go to those places I can't go. I'm asking you to do what you love to do. And my request, you said, matters. Thank you for sending somebody to talk to those people I can't reach.